Welcome to the Lost Boys, the Found Fathers podcast. I'm Gabe O'Sullivan, and joining me is my co-host, Will Haycox. We are men who have suffered the loss of a child, and through this production, we desire to offer encouragement, strength, and hope to our fellow brothers who have traveled the same journey. Welcome back, Will, and thank you all for joining us on episode 32, as we're going to continue our discussion from last episode about, when will I ever be able to live normally again? When will I be able to laugh, normally again? And what does that look like going through? So we had spent episode 31 kind of talking about some difficult things that you may be experiencing after the loss of a child. And so now we're going to talk about some kind of encouraging and practical steps of how do I move past those thoughts of negativity, guilt, depression that we talked about last time, and how do we move into a new normal, so to speak.
Thank you for that, Gabe. And yeah, that's pretty much what we were planning on. There was last episode was going to be a little tough, a little heavy, acknowledging it's not going to be normal for a while. Maybe it won't be normal in the same sense that you knew normal before ever again, but just because you said there, just because it's not normal doesn't mean it's bad. I think that's a good thing to remember, because we're creatures of habit. I know some of us like change, accept change more than others. I know I'm the kind that when things change, my first reaction is, nope, don't like this. This isn't as good as what it was before, and change is bad. I don't want it. So, that happens, whether it's some major change in my life or if I come home and my wife's like, let's repaint the walls over here. I'm like, I don't know. Kind of like this weird gray-green color we have. I don't know if I want to switch to a green-gray. So, yeah. So what we're going to do in this episode, we're going to try to give you some more practical steps as to how to get back towards quote-unquote normal life. And I think the first one, if you have listened to all the episodes to this point, you're probably getting tired of us saying it, but if you are getting tired of us saying it, I think you've missed the point of the show. Seeking a deeper relationship with God is going to be the only thing that's going to heal you in a real and lasting way. Like I said, we've said this several times throughout the podcast, that we've talked about doing a quiet time. We've talked about accountability groups. We've talked about books that our pastor's written, and we've got tons of verses that we've quoted out of the Bible here. And that's because this podcast is about our faith, about what the Lord's done for us, and how he has allowed us to trust him, to see hope in him, and what he has done for us through sacrifice of Jesus and his resurrection. And so just to know that God is true and your feelings may not always be, I think is a really important thing. And I threw in here Proverbs 3:5-8, and it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord, and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. If you're familiar with Proverbs, it's exactly what it says. It's a book of wise sayings, and some of them make more sense to us in our modern context than others. But I think you could take every one of these verses here separately, and they'd all be good advice, and to take them all together just really patterns a life of living after God's plans, God's heart, and choosing his wisdom rather than your convenience. And Gabe, you can jump in here, but each of these, like I just said, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. That should be everybody's life verse. I know it should be mine, because half the time, or more than half the time, I wake up in the morning, it may not be a clean cut. Am I going to trust God, or am I going to lean on my own understanding? But most of the time, if I'm not intentional about it, I end up leaning on my own understanding and doing what I want to do. Verse 6, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he'll make straight your paths. When I end up leaning on my own understanding, the path can get kind of crooked and kind of rocky there. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord, and turn away from evil. Being wise in your own eyes is a reason why I choose to lean on my own understanding. And typically it leads me towards evil more than it leads me towards good. And verse 8, it'll be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. So basically, to boil all that down, trust God, follow His plan. Don't think that you're smarter than God and follow your own path, because that leads to evil and God's ways lead to good. And if you do this, not only is it for your benefit, but it's for your healing and refreshes you in your body. So I think that's just one of many verses that could counsel you to trust God and to follow Him. And we read at the end of last episode, Romans 8:28-32, and that's just the passage there where it talks about what God has done for us and how for those who are called according to His purpose, He's promised to turn all things for good. And I think that's the kind of God, the kind of encourager that we need when we're going through a loss, like losing a child. And I just know, I'll let you speak to this, Gabe, but I know for me, if I didn't have this relationship with the Lord, I would not be here doing this podcast for sure, but who knows where I'd be. My wife and I could be divorced. I could be following old habits that I was in before I was a Christian that were destructive life habits, may not be gainfully employed, whatever, or I could be all those things and I could just be the most bitter person that you've ever been around. So the Lord really has been the biggest part of me getting back to a, quote, normal life and being able to live in a way that encourages others and builds them up rather than tearing down everybody around me.
That's awesome. And I think that goes right to that last verse you read where it said, it will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones, because you have allowed the Lord to heal you. You know, some guys are going to not do that. If they don't have that relationship with the Lord, they're going to think they just need to, muscle through this, but it's not going to end up going well. I'm not saying that you don't have some natural ability to overcome this, because people do every day to an extent, but like to truly be healed and refreshed, like we need to let God do that, because you and I believe that God created you, so He knows your inmost being, as the word says, and so He knows exactly what you need to heal, a whole lot better than you know what you need to heal, and that's where that's exactly what you're saying, man. That's what you've allowed God to do, and so that's our prayer for anybody that's listening to this, that they would come into that relationship with Christ and allow Him to heal them. And not only is this for benefit for you now, but this benefits you for eternity. Because again, if we're not talking about, hey, just follow some religion so that you have some sort of peace here on earth through your tragedies or difficulties. We're talking about saving your soul so you don't die and go to hell one day and spend eternity separated from your child. We're talking about, spending eternity in heaven with the Lord who saved you, so that way you're not eternally punished. So I know that's kind of heavy, but that's the truth, and that's what we believe, and that's why it's not only important that you give your life to Christ for the positive benefits that you'll gain now on earth, but most importantly, because eternity is a long time, as Prince says in one of his songs, right? So always got to throw a little shout out to Prince every now and then. And so I want to follow that up with a point that you make here on our notes that says, do not chase the same life and feelings that you had before. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think you could really apply it to any major life change. Like I said in the last episode, change is something that humans always struggle with. If you say you had a long-term relationship, a long-term girlfriend, and you have all the same friends and you hang out in all the same places, and things go bad and you break up with her, you're not going to be able to do all those things. Like, you might try, you might still go hang out with all those friends, and you might still go to all those places, but probably she's going to be there. And even if she's not there, there's going to be some residual awkwardness when the friends try to decide, am I his friend or am I her friend? Or is this his hangout place with us? Or is this her hangout place with us? So as much as you try to make things the same as they always were for your own comfort, they're never going to be that way. If you have a job and say you've gotten along for 10 years as you and these 10 coworkers, and there's a boss, then the boss retires and you get promoted, like, that's good that you got promoted. But your relationship with all those coworkers that you've had for a decade isn't going to be the same, because change changes things, and it can't always be the same no matter how comfortable you were with what you had before. So just the same way that those situations aren't the same circumstances. Remember that you're not the same person that you were before your wife got pregnant, and that you knew, like, hey, I am a father now, even though my child's not born. There is a human inside my wife, and I'm a father to that person. And then it changes you when you feel that baby kick for the first time, and it changes you when your child is born, or if your child is stillborn, or if you miscarry. It changes you when you find out that that child isn't with you anymore and it's in heaven. And just the same way that you're changed there, your relationship with your wife is going to be changed, because now you're having to go through this grief that, even if we talked about last episode, you may have been prepared for losing a child if you've experienced grief in the immediate family before. Even if you and your wife have both experienced great grief, you've never experienced the loss of a child. You never experienced this loss together. So learning to be patient and loving and gentle, I think, are going to be the most important things you can do with your wife. And you can throw in some other adjectives there maybe, but being these things that aren't adjectives, are they? They're verbs. Sorry, grammar Nazis. But
man, I don't know, bro. I'm a chiropractor. Yeah. I'm not an English major.
I was a history major, so I should know.
There you go.
But no, I mean, learning to be those things to your wife, and to have that grace, extend that grace to her when she's having a bad day, and maybe she's just so caught up and bound up, and her nerves are so frazzled by trying to handle and deal with daily life and the loss of your child, that she lashes out at you, or she shuts down and she doesn't want to talk to you, or whatever it is. Remember that you are going to deal with those same things. You may not respond the same way that she responds, but you can't control someone else's actions. So for you to control your actions and to reach out to your wife with patience and with love and kindness and gentleness, that's the only way you're going to really create or establish an environment where you and your wife can have a healing relationship toward one another.
And I would like to say those are definitely adjectives.
They are adjectives.
Patience, love, and kindness. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, okay.
But and I love what you said there, that's you were saying, like, you were speaking to personal responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
You were saying, hey, if I'm experiencing a situation where my wife is having a hard time, how am I going to respond to that? With patience, with love, with kindness, with gentleness,
mm-hmm.
with understanding, right? We talked about with Pastor Ashton, seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is such a great point there, man, because we can't control other people. We can't control what other people do, say, think, but we can control how we respond to that, and it makes me think back to playing or coaching a 6th grade boys basketball team years ago. And I had this one kid that was a hothead, and man, if he felt like he was getting fouled too much, which in that age group they're all getting fouled, like every play that down the court, it's just whether the refs call it or not. Well, he could let that just derail him, and he was a pretty good player. Mm-hmm. But when he got angry, like, then it just turned into like WWE instead of basketball. And I remember this because it spoke to me, and I don't know where it came from. It came from my inner Coach K, I guess. I pulled him over to the sideline, and I was like, because it was getting a little heated, and I said, listen, boys, who is in control of you, and who's in control of this game? The refs are terrible. They're not making good calls. The other team's fouls. I was like, no. Who's in control of you, and who's in control of this game? I don't know. What are you talking about? And I was like, you are. Like, you are the only one that's in control of you. Like, they are in control of them. They might be doing something you don't like or agree with right now, but you're in control of how you respond to that. And in my moment of Zen Shisheskyism, I was like, wow, that's going to stick with me. Obviously I needed to hear that as much as they needed to hear that. So it's not about what's going on around us. It's about how do we respond to what's going on around us. And I will throw this in because I'm a big, I don't know. I'm a big fan of reading about special forces and this kind of thing, because I didn't ever do any of that, except for when I was like 9 years old, like playing in the creek. And I thought I was Rambo or Commando or something like that, right? But the Navy SEAL creed, a few of them are calm is contagious, slow is smooth, smooth is fast, and that kind of makes me think about that when we're like, okay, it just goes back to personal responsibility. Like, if a situation's tough or seems unmanageable, let's detach from that. And this is not my original stuff. Go listen to Jocko Willink, and you'll learn a lot more about this. We detach from that situation. We pull ourselves back, and we think, okay, I can either act to this or I can react to this. Sure. It's better if we take ourselves back, think about how can we calmly and smoothly, address this situation or these feelings that my wife may be having that are different than mine, and then or even feelings that we may be having that we kind of realize, oh man, this is not rational, or this is dangerous, or this is like not good for me. Well, how can I back up from this and then pivot and then move in a different direction that is healthy?
Yeah, and just like you said there, don't try to control things you can't control, and don't, like you said, if you get too caught up, you realize like, hey, I can't handle this right now. I'm about to, whatever, burst in whatever way. I'm about to just totally pull myself away, or I'm about to scream, or, whatever it is. I think a good piece of advice there, like you said, is to just be open to the new, and don't try to hold on to the old or try to force a situation to be what you want it to be and what you're maybe more comfortable with, because if you do that, in this context, you might delay healing between you and your wife, or you might prevent relationships from growing or damage the relationship even worse if you're trying to. We've talked before, about the differences, stereotypically the differences between men and women grieving. And if you just come up to your wife one day and you're like, hey, you've been crying for a week, get over it. It's probably not going to help your relationship, man.
It's not going to go well.
Just in case you were wondering, it's generally not the way you should talk to your wife ever if you want to have a good marital relationship. But especially in this context, that grief is different for each person, we've said several times, and especially between you and your wife, that's something that you need to handle with grace and openness to the new, and embrace it, that this is what it is now, and you can see good, you can see growth, and you can see love bloom in new ways between you and your wife when she sees that you're there for her, and that you are patient and you're gentle with her when she's having a bad day. And the same token, when your wife is patient and shows love and grace to you when you're having a bad day, you get to see a new side of her that you've never seen before. And I think it's important that you and your wife are on the same page, and I guess the easiest way to get on that same page is to show this kindness and patience, and having conversations with each other about where you are in your grief, and how's the day been, how's the week been, how's the month been, looking back. And like we talk about, trying to force things isn't going to help it, but taking the chance to sit down with your wife and just like, we call it at work, like a check-in meeting. And it doesn't have to be obviously as formal as a check-in with your wife on her feelings and your feelings. But if you want to call it that, sure, like sit down once a week with your wife and just be like, hey, how are things? It's been a week, it's been a month, it's been 2 years. How are you feeling? And how's the last year been? How do you think our relationship is? I think it's a healthy thing to have those conversations proactively, rather than waiting until you or your wife just cannot stand the situation and you just approach that conversation with, I hate this that you're doing and I hate that you're doing, and then immediately you get defensive, things fall apart. So as important as it is to be on the same page, I think it's important to not smother one another, and I think that all ties back into, I don't have to get into that all ties back into acting with patience and kindness and gentleness. And it's hard to be patient and pesky at the same time. So I think if you're acting with patience that's good. And I'll let you. What were you gonna say there, Gabe?
No, I just say that's all so good, and I'll just say remind the guys that your wife wants you to be her rescuer. Like that's what she wants, and even if she doesn't know how to express that, deep down, that's what she wants. Women want to have someone that is there that they can feel safe with, and it's important for you to remember that so that you will be that strong man for her. But she also wants to know that you're a human. And so there's that delicate balance between being strong, being her rock, helping her move forward, but also letting her know that you do have feelings. And we've talked about that in previous episodes, about how you're not just a robot that doesn't care about the situation, because then that would cause a great deal of hurt and pain if she didn't think that you cared, or if you acted as if though you didn't care. So just remember, you're her rock, but you're also her shoulder to cry on at the same time.
Yeah, I think the last bit of advice we'll leave you with, and this one is just to let good things happen. And I know that's probably, when I wrote it, I was like, that sounds kind of hippy dippy,
Yes,
sounds
that's a new T-shirt.
Silly, yeah. It's the
Instead of
T-shirt.
Life is good. We're gonna
let good things happen. But I think it's true. If I know there are times in my life when I was just so worried about something, I was so frustrated, I was so anxious that like someone could have walked up to me and been like, "Here's $20 million," and I would have been like, "Why are you giving that to me? You're trying to get something from me? You're trying to control me? You're trying to manipulate me?" Instead of being like, $20 million. Cool. Sure, I'll take that. So I think the same thing, like if you're so focused on your pain, your anger, your grief, that your entire outlook is soured, it's not likely you'll be able to find much joy in life, and that's joy in somebody just gave you a life-changing amount of money, or in something that's probably a little more likely to happen. Your wife comes to you sweetly one day and she's like, let's just spend the day together. Like it's been a while since we've had a weekend where we can both relax. Let's just hang out around the house. We'll stay in our pajamas. We'll watch movies, or let's go out on the town and let's do something. If your outlook is soured by dwelling on all of the hurt and the pain and the grief to the point that you don't want to relax, you don't want to open yourself up to, like you just said there, Gabe, instead of being strong for her, you don't want to open yourself up to seeming weak because you were whatever, you didn't want to go do this fun thing that she wanted to do. Then instead of having that good time of healing and just rest with your wife, you're going to put another block in the wall between the two of you. And I think Romans 13:15 says, "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit you may abound in hope." So the God of hope will fill you with all joy and peace so that you may abound in hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. And again, God is more powerful than your grief, your depression, the sourness that you might feel if you focus on pain and anger and grief. But then those things don't work together. It may take, if you just build up this wall between you and the world and you isolate yourself, it's going to be a whole lot harder, and it's going to take a lot longer for the Holy Spirit to fill you and to beat down that wall and build up hope and joy in your life. So if you are open to that in the first place, he doesn't have to knock a wall down to get you where he wants you to be. So just some practical things there, Gabe, like make time to spend nights out with your friends, have board game nights, whatever, go to the dinner, go see your friends and take trips, go see your family, whatever it is that you used to do and you used to enjoy, go do those things. That life doesn't have to be totally different, and just because you've been through this trauma doesn't mean that you have to sit at home every day on the couch and cry. That you and your wife can go and do fun things. And so some things change, some things remain the same. It may take you weeks, months, or years, but if you're intentional to draw closer to the Lord, draw closer to your wife, allow the Lord to work in your heart, you can eventually find yourself taking pleasure in the good gifts that God's given you and the provisions that he's provided. So just take the time to thank God for giving you the blessings he's given you, and he will draw you nearer to him.
Man, that's great. And I think, the thing that we want you to leave this episode with is that you can experience good again, but you have to sometimes be proactive in getting it back out there and getting back in the game, so to speak. And that's going to be good. That's going to be healthy. That's going to be good for your healing. So thank y'all for joining us again today on this episode 32. Make sure you follow Lost Boys and Found Fathers on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can check out my book. It's called Thy Will Be Done. You can put a question mark at the end of that phrase. And my name's Gabriel O'Sullivan. And I will throw up a little shout out here. This is February 12th, 2022. Hopefully by the end of this month, you'll be able to search for a new book that I have I'm putting out. And it's called... let me think of the name. I've changed the name so many times. The name of this book is going to be Every Little Thing, 6 Small Steps to Perfect Peace. And you'll be able to find that wherever you buy books. So thank you all again for joining us. Let's not be lost. Let's be found in Him.